Evergrande files for bankruptcy. Evergrande files for bankruptcy. Now, if you're here in the United States of America, most people have never heard of Evergrande. Most people don't care about Evergrande at all. You know why they don't care about Evergrande? Because it's not right in front of their face and it's not a popular term or a subject. And it's a Chinese company that is then listed here in the United States. And so they've recently filed for bankruptcy. Everybody expected it. But more importantly, it underscores the environment and the current situation in which China is going through. Make sure y'all hit a like for the YouTube algorithm, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications. Let's get into it, y'all.
China's Evergrande, because the slow motion collapse of the world's most indebted property developer has just entered a new stage. The embattled company has filed for bankruptcy protection in the US, while its restructuring plans are being carried out elsewhere. Meanwhile, signs of trouble are spreading across China's broader property market, with large housing units remaining unfinished and buyers who pay deposits skipping payments as a result. Another major developer, Country Garden, has warned that it may not be able to make interest payments on its bonds as it struggles to find the cash to finish projects around the country. Well, joining me now is our Asia business reporter, Katie Silver. Katie, bring us up to date with the latest on what's happening with Evergrande.
Hi, Tag. So as you mentioned, they've filed
Hey, Hermes, I love you too, baby girl.
for bankruptcy protection in the US. They've done this under Chapter 15, which governs foreign companies in the US that are undergoing restructurings, basically for protecting them from any creditors that may want to sue them. So you've probably heard of Chapter 11. That typically governs American companies, but as I say, this Chapter 15 for foreign companies. Now, according to court filings, they say these negotiations are ongoing in Hong Kong, the Cayman Islands, as well as the British Virgin Islands. We've reached out to Evergrande, but so far not yet heard back for confirmation on all this. But
Now, if you look in this picture right here, and let me give you guys a little bit of insight, because a lot of people are not familiar with what Evergrande is or what's happening in China. And then we're going to tie this into BRICS, right? Somebody said it inside of the chat. They said, let me go and highlight it really quickly. One second. There we go. BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. South Africa just tagging along because they don't have no choice. A lot of China and a lot of foreign investors have already owned the majority of their land anyway, and so they didn't really have a choice in tagging along. They had a choice, but they really didn't have a choice. This is just my opinion. But Evergrande, let me bring it back. Evergrande is a large development company that ultimately, right, overdeveloped, but they were incentivized by the federal government over in China to continue to do so. Well, why? That's what we're going to dive into right now, why it is that they've filed for Chapter 15 bankruptcy, which is completely different from Chapter 11 bankruptcy, okay?
reminder for those who think, actually, I've probably heard of Evergrande before. It is, of course, China's huge property giant. We were talking about it a lot a couple of years ago. They have about 1,300 different projects across 280 different cities in China.
280 different cities, 1,300 projects all going on at the same time. All going on at the same time. 280 cities. 280 cities that is developing 1,300 projects all at the same time. Now, if you look at this right here in this picture, what you don't realize is that the overwhelming majority of these new buildings and apartments and these new condos that they've built over in China are vacant. They are vacant. The overwhelming majority of all of these buildings over here in China are vacant. It's ghost cities. There's nobody in them. It's nobody in these cities. It's ghost cities. And so now they're trying to do a debt restructuring in order to prevent creditors from being able to sue them for the money that they owe them, right? And what it's doing is it's worsening China's property crisis because China's economy is really weak. It's a weak economy. It's a perceived economy of growth. It's a perception that they're stronger than what they really are. But the reality is that this is just the first domino to fall that highlights how weak China's economy really is. And see, the beautiful thing about capitalism is that it's self-sustaining, even though it may not necessarily be fair. Because the market is the thing that dictates what is going to be successful, right? You can't control the market. The market is what controls itself. The consumers is what controls the market, which is what dictates what the market is. The belief in a currency, the belief in a market is the value that we then give to it. The only reason why the dollar is sustainable, the only reason why the dollar has any value, even though it's not worth the paper that it's printed on, is because at first it was backed against actual precious metals, right? But now it's based off of our belief in it. It's based off of our belief in it, similar to this manufactured economy that was happening over in China, right? China is trying to shore up its struggling economy by lowering interest rates and overbuilding and then promising people that their money would be safe, continuing to invest in its property development companies, right? Which ultimately is a downward spiral, and eventually everything is going to collapse on each other, because you should not be investing, similar to what Lucian said. William Lucian says you shouldn't be investing in Chinese companies. They're over manufacturing in order to sustain an economy that can't sustain itself without the participation and the success of the people within this capitalistic structure. Let's continue.
And they invest in everything, not just property. They also have, for example, an electric vehicle maker as well as a football club. But as I mentioned, 2021 was when we saw the company default on its debts, sending shockwaves across the global financial system and in fact triggering a string of defaults across other builders who were either owed money from Evergrande or were expecting Evergrande to complete some contracts with them. Since 2021, we've seen about 40%, or the companies that make up about 40% of China's.
But the thing about Evergrande is not the only Chinese company that's defaulting on its debt. It's not the only Chinese company that is going to be defaulting on its debt. I'm going to be reading these super chats shortly. Hold on, let me highlight them to make sure I don't forget them. It's not the only Chinese company that's defaulting on its debt. It's a string of companies that's defaulting, running into trouble, unfinished homes, unpaid suppliers. No consumer confidence, which is the worst thing that you can do, because when consumers don't feel comfortable, why do you think that President Biden started getting up in front of the people and started pandering when they seen Silicon Valley Bank start to crash and they seen other banks crash? It wasn't that banks don't crash on a regular basis. It's our belief in the banking system, which is why that they say the banking system was too big to fail in 2008 when they had the housing crisis, right? You got to remember that China is the world's second largest economy. Property investment, sales, new construction, all of that stuff matters in order to keep things rolling, in order to keep the pyramid rolling, right? The property crisis is crazy over there.
Housing sector defaults. And currently, as we understand it, Evergrande has about $300 billion in debt. It's lost about $80 billion in the last 2 years. And in fact,
$300 billion in debt, $80 billion lost in the last 2 years. $300 billion in debt. $300 billion. It's a house of cards. It's literally a house of cards, and it's the first one to fall.
Has even been in a trading halt its shares since last year, Tig.
Yeah, indeed. And as we've been saying, the property market very much in the focus in China right now. We saw house prices earlier this week dip for the first time since the ending of pandemic restrictions. Worth stressing, though, Evergrande is a different company to the other one that's been in the headlines a lot in recent weeks and months. That's Country Garden. Can you bring us up to speed on what's happening with that company?
Sure. So they say, for example, that the losses of if Country Garden was to go under, that would be far, far greater than Evergrande. It's a much larger company. It, of course, warned in the last couple of weeks that it was going to make about an $8 billion loss in the first half of this year. And for any of us who remember the trials and tribulations of Evergrande, you could almost have a little bit of PTSD. They also told bondholders that they were not going to be able to service the bond repayments. This was, of course, the start of Evergrande's troubles. We have seen its shares up today about 3%, but they've lost almost half their value in their past month. And the issue here is those unfinished projects that you mentioned. Basically, people buying properties off the plan, seeing construction falter, and then buyers therefore stopping paying their mortgages, and that further causing financial stresses for these developer countries. And it must be said as well that these developers in the property sector makes up about a third of China's economy. So it's a really pivotal sector.
Think about that. It makes up these developers makes up a third of China's economy, which means that the government has an incentive in order to keep this thing rolling, in order to continue to accelerate growth. China predicted 5% growth throughout the year, which a lot of people are expecting them to miss. You got these property development companies literally creating, maybe I'll do a whole review and maybe I'll break it down for you all. But there's videos on YouTube where people actually are over in China and showing entire brand new cities with stoplights, brand new roads, growth. These development companies are creating these huge structures and a lot of infrastructure, and they building all of this stuff, and nobody lives there. Nobody lives there. And so the first thing that you got to ask yourself is, well, why are they doing this? Why are they doing it? Why? Well, A, to continue to instill consumer confidence, to basically incentivize people to continue to invest their money. And then B, in order to continue to maintain this perspective of perceived growth when it's not organic. Growth is not real if it's not organic. Growth is not real if it's not organic. And so people will ask me, well, Anton, what do you think about this BRICS, this new BRICS thing, right? I'm not as concerned about it as everybody else. I don't know. Maybe I should be. I'm not concerned about it as everybody else. I think that they are spending a lot of time focused on the wrong things instead of trying to actually fix their own countries and their own economies. Russia is absolutely in motherfucking shambles. The ruble is worth shit, is worth nothing. South Africa, nobody cares. The only real player in this thing, in my opinion, is India, because it's the only place that has real sustained growth. China's economy is a house of cards that's fallen. They have bigger problems even beyond their economy, including the one-child rule, in which the majority of the people or the citizens are now aging out, and you don't have enough young people in order to be able to support the economy. Then you have all of these property development companies in which a third of the economy is then dependent on it in order to be able to sustain itself. And you're telling me about this BRICS system or this BRICS partnership that is going to do what again? When? Where? I'm not as concerned about it as everybody else. I'm paying attention to a lot of people that's talking about it. I'm not going to say no names or none of that, but I'm paying attention to a lot of these fear mongering and all of this shit that's happening over there. I'm not concerned about it at all. Matthew says he thinks I'm wrong on this one. I'm also open to the possibility that I'm wrong. It's a discussion. I'm not saying definitively that I'm right. I'm saying that I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it at all. Not even a little bit. Not even a little bit. Real talk. I'm not even a little bit worried about it.